Welcome to episode 7 of Spirited Conversations. Today, I'm really excited to have Sarah Jeffery with me. And I always think that Sarah Jeffery might as well be an octopus because of all the roles that she has working for the spirit world. She's best known as the magic maker behind At One events, bringing some of the world's best known and well-respected mediums to teach in Australia. And together with her husband, Julian Glover, she hosts residential retreats and workshops where students work hard and discover their abilities in an evidential and an ethical way. But Sarah is no newcomer. She's served the spirit world for over 20 years and even runs her own teaching circles, both in Canberra and online, which I'm very grateful to be one of her students for. But Sarah also, in her spare time, she's recently become president of the Canberra Spiritualist Association that you may have already seen because she's been running her services online with some brilliant mediums that come every second Sunday, so that they're bringing the love and the confirmation from the spirit word right to your lounge room as well. But I'm sure the lucky locals are missing out when you do that. So in her spare time, Sarah also works a muggle job. She does readings, drinks the occasional gin and tonic, and all the while hosting a whole lot of development circles. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Denise. What a charming introduction. I haven't been compared to an octopus before, but I've certainly felt like one. I certainly have felt like one. Oh. But before we go on, I just want to say, you're talking about the church services we're doing online. And for those who don't know, Denise has been our technical guru and saving me to help get these wonderful international mediums serving our church. So I have to acknowledge that little shout out to you, Denise, because it's really wonderful.
We are all learning, aren't we, in this COVID time? We all stretching and discovering different ways to work, and it's been a blessing because I've probably seen more mediums work over this whole lockdown period than ever before. So it's been fantastic.
It's so true. You can see this lovely connection of people, meeting up in ways that would never have happened, as you say. But also what I've noticed is there's almost like a rebuilding of bridges of people who might not have had anything to do with each other over the years. And that sort of interconnectedness. I think it's given us time to sit and pause and think about people, think about connections, want to reach out. And you're right, what an opportunity for mediums for developing to see, some top level mediums around the world and what they're doing. And they're all serving spirit in their own wonderful ways, which is wonderful.
And often, to help out, not even for payment as well. They're just doing it to be of service.
That's absolutely true. As you know, we host some international mediums, and it's absolutely fabulous when you can send a little message out into the ether and say, Paul Jacobs, would you be available? And Mavis Patilla, would you be available? And, the answers are yes. And they say yes. And they say yes. And you just think, how lucky, how privileged are we that these people are willing to, offer up their service to the spirit world, to the community. And it's really heartwarming. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and get up at like 6 a.m. as well for them.
And earlier. We've had some technical time hitches where we've misunderstood the different time zones. And as you know, we've woken up some mediums a little bit earlier saying, no, you needed to be up at 4 a.m, not 5 a.m. So that's dedication, isn't it?
Yes. So speaking of early mornings, what gets you up and out of your dressing gown in the morning when you have to work for spirit?
Well, the dressing gown isn't pretty, so let's put that out there first, Denise. What gets me up? You know what it is? It's wanting to share with as many people as I possibly can the eternal nature of life, and just taking away that fear of death, so when people, I can't think of anything worse than the idea that people can go through a life thinking that when they go, that's it, that's the end.
So there's nothing.
There's nothing. I think how terrifying. And how would you be on your deathbed if that was your true belief, that, you know, if you were lucky, you got 80 years, so many people get less than that. What about, you know, parents of young children, the idea that once they're gone, they're gone. So that aspect of, no, that's not the truth. They're still with us. They still exist. That will still reunite. So taking away the fear, bringing the balm of healing to those who are in grief, to say, okay, it hurts. You know, the knowledge of the spirit world doesn't get rid of grief. You know,
no, we're still human. We still get to have all of that feelings.
And I know that there's a lot of mediums who, when they suffer their own losses, they start to berate themselves a bit with the, oh, but I know they're alive and I should know better. But first and foremost, we're having a human experience. It's the heart. So to be able to bring, I guess, that little balm that says, okay, this is hard and this hurts, but it's not the end. There will be a connection, will be reunited, but they're not, you know, they're only a thought away from you. So yeah, what gets me out of bed is wanting to get rid of the fear, wanting to prove the spirit world, wanting to have the best mediums we possibly can out there, doing the work of the spirit world. That's what gets me out of bed.
Because it's not just talking about the philosophy. It's not just saying, oh, well, you know, you don't die and they're in the spirit world. The whole idea about mediumship is proving that, isn't it? By having the messages and the evidence and being able to say, oh, you know, since I've been gone, I know that, you know, look at those rose bushes in your garden, they've grown, for example, and, you know, that stuff that no one would know since they've passed. So that's the proof, isn't it?
It is the proof. And as you say, Denise, it's about evidential mediumship. It's about putting someone's mind to rest in such a way that they can say, there is no way that person could know that. And, you know, and we want to be the sort of people, the sort of mediums that give skeptics a really difficult time. We want skeptics to be going, I don't know how they did that. I don't know where that information came from. You know, it wasn't cold reading, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. We want to be the sort of mediums where, you know, the heart needs touched, but the mind, the analytical mind says there has to be more to this. We can only plant the seed. You know, over my years of development and in my early days, I wished I could run and knock on everyone's door and say, I have the answer, I have the truth, I know that there's a spirit world. And I would have been, you know, having people slam the door in my face going, there's a loony out there. But the point is, we do have the truth. We have a wonderful truth. We can just plant the seed of that. And then it lays dormant, or it is given the opportunity to blossom within the hearts and spirits of those who hear it. So, yeah, evidence is really important.
The evidence. And people think, you know, going to retreats and workshops, it's hard work, and some of our tutors are quite strict, aren't they? But that's really the passion for getting the evidence so the skeptics can't say, oh, well, you know, it's cold reading, or it's... Is that what prompted you to create At One Events?
At One Events is a funny story, Denise. It's a it's an organic, strange story, really. Yes, you're right that there was the prompting of wanting to bring, you know, really quality training to Australian mediums. You know, we don't have the...
we didn't have it,
no. You know. And it's not to say good mediums haven't come out to Australia before at One Events. Of course they have. But we really haven't had it on tap. We really haven't had that many opportunities. And if you didn't know certain people, you wouldn't even know that those opportunities existed.
You have to scratch around for that.
You do have to scratch around. But when I look back at how At One Event started, I have to sort of quote Mavis Patilla, because Mavis will talk about the Divine Architect's plan.
And she was the first tutor that you brought out.
She was. So probably about 7 years ago now, I have a lovely friend, Silvana La Pena, who's an intuitive lady herself. And she'd been saying to me for years, Sarah, you should host Mavis Patilla to Australia. And I used to laugh at her and say, you're crazy. I'm not just going to be this random chick from Australia who sends Mavis Patilla a message, noting that I hadn't even been on one of her courses. You know, I hadn't trained with her. She didn't know me from a bar or so. And Silvana would say this every now and again, and I'd laugh and I'd laugh. Anyhow, Mavis then did come out to Australia and did a retreat in Sydney with another host. And this darling lady, Silvana, helped as the administration get that week up and going. Now, as it happened, the following year, the same host couldn't do another retreat. And Silvana was sort of back on the phone saying, Sarah, you should host Mavis Patilla. And it was at that point I sort of turned to Julian and said, okay, so what do you think? Shall we give it a go? She doesn't know us. Do we do it? Anyhow, we ummed and ahed. I'm not very good at taking no for an answer. Julian's a little bit more cautious, which is good. We've got some yin and yang going there of me wanting to jump in and run to things, and Julian doing the, should we think about this? Anyhow, we fired off a letter to Mavis, and just sort of gave our background that, we were both mediums. Julian was a healing medium, who our teachers had been, that we had no background in hosting, but I was an ex-army officer and I knew how to put a mission together, basically. Unbeknownst to me, Mavis was just heading to Arthur Findlay College at the time she received it. And in the staff room at the time were Julian's teachers, my old teachers, and a number of other mediums. And I still wonder to this day whether Mavis asked, does anyone know this Sarah Jeffery and Julian Glover? Anyhow, long story short, Mavis and her lovely partner Jean came back with a yes, and all of a sudden at one event had to be created from nothing. So it was a huge learning curve. It was massive, and because it was Mavis, right? So there was a lot of interest, a lot of people. We had to find where we were going to go. We had to create a company, and even the little silly things when you look back and think, what are we going to call this? And we went through hundreds and hundreds of names of what this company.
Because At One Events is an unusual name.
Well, it is. And, if you look at our email, it looks like a tone events.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we probably didn't do the marketing research on that. It's kind of funny. But At One Events really just sums up everything that we want it to be. We're at one with spirit, we're at one with the community, we're at one as a family, we're at one with nature, and now I look back and I think, you know what, little did we know that was actually the perfect name. Even though I have a little giggle about our Atone Events email, but
you're probably feeling like you atone every time something has a kerfuffle or a
that's right,
glitch
that's right. So, and then after Mavis, there was every time we got a new instructor, Denise, that kind of fell out of the sky and into our laps. And I just think, the spirit world has a plan sometimes that we're oblivious to.
Yes.
So each of our instructors, either they were coming out to Australia and something got cancelled, or they were being hosted by someone and then that didn't quite happen. And just one after the other. We had a lovely Scottish medium, Irene McGilvray, who'd visited Australia. She just came and I'd met her in Canada, actually the same time I met Julian. And Irene, lovely lady, and she visits Australia and she'd come and done some workshops, little weekend workshops. Well, unbeknownst to us, Irene was back in the UK telling every tutor, Sarah Jeffery, Julian Glover, and was being this wonderful advertisement for us. So we had support that we
gets
didn't
there.
even know we had.
Yes, and that's usually how it happens, isn't it? And so, but you, I mean, you're busy running workshops, you're running retreats. You've just done this fantastic hosted Paul again for this course that I'm just hearing now back. Some of my students are going, oh my God, it was amazing. So how do you get your development? How do you get your, because I know sometimes you have amazing little chats to the tutors, and it's almost like you get one-on-one mentoring when they come over too.
It's you know, we are so lucky, Denise. We're so lucky because, of course, as you know, when we're doing the big retreats, sometimes I'm just sitting in the back of the classroom absorbing it. Sometimes there's an odd number of students, so I'll be thrown in to be the other pair and participate. And with different tutors, sometimes I'll be thrown in at the deep end to deliver. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, as you know. Look, I just look at the last 5 years, and there are pieces of wisdom that I've picked up from the instructors that I wish I'd known 20 years ago, you know, where you think, why didn't I know that? What, it seems so commonsensical now, and how much angst would have been saved if I'd just gotten that one little piece, you know, if I just understood that. So, you know, when I look at my circle members and I'll come back from a retreat and I'll say, oh, Sarah, we got so much out of that, you know, it's like, well, think about it. You know, we have weekly classes and it might be an hour and a half, 2 hours. You go, well, now make it 12 hours a day for 5 days. That's 6 months of circles. That's 6 months of your weekly lesson crammed in. You're surrounded by other people who you're living it, you're breathing it, you're soaking in it. It's, you know, it's that whole feeling of the retreats where you're with your colleagues. You know, we've got that beautiful, you know, we call it the At One Events family, where you've got this group of like-minded people who are there supporting each other, students who support each other, tutors who support each other. And, you know, so we can't help but learn. We cannot help but learn as we watch the tutors work, watch the students work, and indeed have our own experiences. So I know on a personal level that my own mediumship has found another level, another expression, just through my experience of the last few years with those wonderful, wonderful tutors.
Because we do, our mediumship is always changing, isn't it? And we get those little nudges and hints from the spirit world, but that hasn't always been the case, because you talk about your wilderness years. And I always imagine, you know, the Jesus going out into the desert, you know. I like, go and find himself. But it was a little bit like that for you too, because you started off your mediumship training about 20 years ago, is that right?
That's right, just over. So I was really, really lucky in that my first teacher in Perth was Christine Morgan, and I was in her circle for 2 years. And all those who know me, that I acknowledge Christine really set me on the right path of discernment and sort of traditional mediumship. And she was also, she also introduced me to other mediums of really high standard, like Simon James and Brian Robertson, who are in Canada and the UK. You know, so the first step off, the first footing was excellent, but I moved away from Perth and moved away from this wonderful circle, and got to Canberra, and there really wasn't a lot going on.
The other side of the continent.
And I was really lost. Well, what am I going to do? So I'd host Christine over to Canberra every now and again, and then you get more students going, well, that was great, but now what do we do? And at that point, Christine said, well, you're going to have to facilitate something. You've got more training than the others.
So you never thought about being a hosting circle, teaching?
No, that was an encouragement at the time. And look, I look back now, Denise, and go, it's not a way I would encourage other people to learn.
Deep end.
And I can look back and you know, with horror when I think about, you know, some of the classes, some of the sessions. But that was how I found my way. And I was lucky in that, you know, some of the people who started with me are still friends to this day. I have circle members who've been with me for 10 years, you know, so they've come along on the ride with me, and I've always promised them that I would share everything I knew to the best of my ability. And if my understanding changes, I will tell them. And I will tell them straight away and why my belief, my understanding has changed. You know, and I think that they accept that we're all growing, we're all learning, we're all changing, and we have to be able to accept that we don't know everything, and we certainly don't know everything from the beginning. So for those who don't have a mentor, who, you know, we listen to a lot of our top tutors who, you know, had some wonderful mentor who sort of maybe didn't always give them an easy time. I'm not suggesting that they were given an easy time at all, but they were taken under the wing and they were taken out to churches, etc., and they were given that guidance. If everyone could have that, I'd say get that. But of course, it doesn't work like that way.
No.
It doesn't work. You know, great teachers can only mentor so many people anyway. And we are lucky because we do have great teachers who teach publicly. Can we say they're mentors? Not necessarily in the traditional sense of, you know, one-on-one.
Yes.
Spending that time. So yes, I do call it the wilderness years, but I was getting my rungs on the board, and I can, you know, look back and go, you know, mediums have to have thick skin.
They do.
We've really got to have thick skin, which sounds like an absolute contradiction when you consider how sensitive we all are. You know, by our very design, we're empaths. We feel greatly. You know, we are oversensitive, yet we are called to this path. And I do say called because I don't understand how anyone would choose to be a medium.
Oh, we wouldn't. Oh my goodness, no.
I just, you know, why would you? Because quite often it hurts. In the way we learn, and we have to be brave, and we have to, you know, get up in front of people. You know, I compare it's a bit like demonstrating mediumship. Who else has to go and do a presentation where they're going to stand up in front of an audience? They don't know what they're going to talk about.
Nothing prepared.
They just literally have to stand up and begin. And when you think about the number of people who are terrified by public speaking and then say, well, not only are you going to do public speaking, but we're not going to give you the topic. You know, so there is a bravery that's required to be a medium.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the wilderness, I think, yeah, that was probably thickening up my skin a little bit. So it wasn't a wasted opportunity. And I'd encourage those who feel that they are in a wilderness, go find some tutors, go and find really good, reputable tutors. Get along to retreats. Go and find your tribe.
It's even easier now, isn't it?
It is easy now.
So easy now.
You know, the best thing is word of mouth. You know, go and have readings. Go and see what someone's like.
See them work.
Yes. You know, that is the test. How do they work? How do they treat you? How did they learn? And then let that be your guide. Trust your own intuition, trust your instinct, where you're drawn. I won't be the right medium for everybody. You won't be the right medium for everybody, but we find our tribe.
The right ones.
Yeah. And it's like you say, you know, not all of our tutors are not love and light.
No.
They're not love and light. And I embrace that. I love that. because they're preparing us for the real world. And the real world is, you may have someone sitting across from you, arms folded, prove it to me. And if you can't sit in your power and sit in the strength of your connection with the spirit world, you'll topple, you'll fall. So you need to have that strength.
And not only that, you might have someone who just recently lost someone very, very close to them, and they're still in those very raw stages of grief. And you better make sure that you're bringing exactly the right information so that person feels like they are not having the mickey taken out of them.
That's right. And there's the ethical side of, you're dealing with a client, and as you say, they could be in huge grief and huge pain. And you may, if you do a poor job, turn their whole belief system upside down, hurt them even more. And then what about the spirit world that you're misrepresenting? And I say this a lot. I'm a bit like a broken record, but I think we're all going to the spirit world. And there is going to be a lineup of those who are our clients in the spirit world. And some will come up and say, Sarah, Denise, whomever, thank you. You got through to my daughter and you brought them great, great joy, and I really appreciate it. But just as many might turn up and say, you said to my son, da-da-da-da, I never said that. I don't want to have to meet too many people in the spirit world that are waiting for me to tell me off. So, we all have off days. We're not perfect.
Yes.
If we can acknowledge that and say to a client, when it's for whatever reason, if it's not working, I'm really sorry, it's not working today. Have your money back. Let me send you to someone else. Whatever that is, we know that we're not perfect. But there's a lot of responsibility on our shoulders.
There is, and yet we're still here, and yet there's many drawn to mediumship, even now more so, I think, which is just fascinating. But it is essentially, mediumship is healing. It's a form of healing, isn't it? We heal with our words, and we heal with our evidence, and we heal in the way that we're able to touch somebody's heart with the information that we bring from spirit side. But I know Julian is an amazing healer in his own right, but you place a lot of emphasis on healing, the both of you, don't you?
We do, because it's all connected. People use the line sort of flippantly of the connection of mind, body and spirit without actually thinking about that with any depth, to say, well, if I have a lot of emotional drama, if I am in my own world of chaos, if I'm struggling with my relationships, if there's something within me that needs healing, what sort of vessel am I going to be to bring healing to others? Now, I'm not saying we've all got to be perfect and our lives have got to be perfect, because that's not reality.
No.
But, even last night listening to Paul, there is that aspect where we each have to look within and acknowledge, there's some divine aspects of ourselves. But you know what? There's darker sides too. And there are aspects where we have to go, I've got to acknowledge that, do something about it. And if I can't or I won't, then I have to accept that aspect of me that may not be brilliant, that may not be wonderful.
But you find some forgiveness in there as well.
Correct. And if we can't be forgiving of ourselves, if we can't see that for our own spirit, how do we bring that to someone else?
Yes.
You look at us, you think about, Denise, how often you'll have a message from the spirit world where the communicator is bringing some form of apology.
Oh, yes.
That for whatever reason they didn't express enough love to their family, or they, that there are things that they are remorseful about. And so there is a great healing that's needed on the spirit side as well as on the human side.
And we forget that it's the spirit person that also needs the healing as well.
That's right.
And the closure and the
closure and to move forward. And if we can't look at ourselves, how are we going to have any understanding of those we represent in the spirit world, those that we're talking to who come to see us? So healing, you know, we are absolutely the biggest supporters of healing, whether it's through the mediumship and through the communication, or whether it's absent healing and the laying on of hands, where, as you know, you've experienced Julian's healing, of how we bring into balance that mind and body and spirit. And, you know, the thing about, you know, hands-on healing, mediumistic healing, is there is no wow factor to it, in the sense of there is no applause, there is no great, you know, razzle dazzle with it. Yet in its own way, it is the most giving of all mediumship, because, you know, I find it fascinating, because I see healers who dedicate themselves to bringing healing to others. They're generally not paid for it. There's generally a real funny thing about, oh, you know, it's a gift, you can't be charging for it. How do you put a monetary value on it?
Yes.
So quite often the healers do all this beautiful, loving intention for very little material reward.
They're the quiet achievers, aren't they?
They are the quiet achievers.
Yeah, I love the emphasis that you put on that, both you and Julian together, and also in the retreats too. And that's the other thing about going in person to a retreat, is you get to sample all these other goodies as well. So not to mention the drinkies that we're allowed to have after everything's finished.
That's right. It's right at the end, isn't it, Denise? No one sneaks any, do they?
Actually, no, I wouldn't dare. You know, I've always thought, even if I'm dying for a glass of wine at dinner time, but I always think, oh my God, you know, Paul's going to see it in my aura or something. And even if he didn't, he'd see my guilty face. And
that's right.
So
that's exactly right.
You know, no. I have to say that the being on retreat is not all serious, and we have a great deal of fun as well.
We certainly do.
And I am thinking about that particular moment, you know, with Scott Milligan, trance tutor, which was fantastic. I was privileged to be in that course. But that moment when, you know, he said, if anything spooky happens, he'll be the first one to run out the door. And I thought, oh my goodness, yes, you know, here he is, this spooky medium that sits in the dark for half of his life. But if anything spooky happened, he's like out of there.
I'm going to publicly out him now with a spooky story of at our wonderful monastery. We have a couple of outbuildings where we put the tutors away from the main building, and they are old. And, you know, they're like old garden sheds that have been turned into accommodation. So it's not prestigious, let me tell you. And
it's monastic.
It's monastic. But if you think the student quarters is, you know, clean and simple, the tutors' quarters are probably just a slight rung down. But Scott was with us, and we'd put him out in this shed, basically, and he had banging and knocking and noises all night long for 2 nights. Oh, no. He was in hysterics. We were in hysterics, so much so that we moved him into the main building. So you're exactly right, Denise. For someone who is so connected to the spirit world,
you see there under his doona, like going,
what is that? What is that? It's like, it's hilarious. It is hilarious.
You don't expect it, but it's so nice to hear, isn't it?
That's right. Well, we're still human, right? Bumps in the night. Yeah,
that was hilarious. And it made him so much more human, and made it so much more grounded in this field that can get quite fantastic, or can get overblown sometimes in some areas. And it's so nice that everyone's just like totally got their feet on the ground.
Well, we have to. We have to, because we're already regarded with some not only skepticism but suspicion. You know, I know that one week when we were at the monastery, there was another group visiting who were basically a church group, and talk about feeling the vibe in the air. And I remember looking at them, looking at us, and I thought, yes, you're quite terrified by us.
It was fear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there was a real fear. And so I think, this is why we have to be grounded. This is why we have to show that we're not, no offense to anyone, but we're not all crystals and sage. They may have their place, but for many that throws conservative people into a state of suspicion. And, it's like sometimes that they have to be able to look at people who look just like them, who have normal jobs, and go, oh, okay, there's something about that person that maybe they're normal.
Maybe they are. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Not that we're normal by any means.
No, we're completely, we're off the trolley.
So here's what I want to ask you next. We're going to rewind time now. So looking back on the eager, curious, hungry, slightly maybe bewildered student medium that you would have been 20 years ago, imagine her. Now imagine the Sarah that is now the 2020 Sarah, and she appears in front of the beginner student in a puff of pink smoke. What would she say? No, probably not. What would she say? What would you say to that beginning student?
Oh, so many things, Denise. She would say, don't doubt your mediumship, but you always will. She would say, have no fear, but you always will. She would say, the gift of the spirit world is in your service, that will be your reward. That will be your reward. Toughen up, but remain gentle. And you're in for a hell of a ride.
And that's actually it, isn't it? We are all in for, we always have been, haven't we? Yeah. That's wonderful. So how can we work with you? Because, you've got the Canberra Spiritualist Association that's also online now in lockdown times. You've got @one events, but you also do readings as well in your own right. That's
right. So, so there's 3 different websites. There's numerous Facebook pages. So, as you know, we're dealing with COVID like everyone else. So @one events, we've had to put a little bit of a pause on our face-to-face gatherings, and we're crossing fingers and toes that our workshops with Chris Drew in October still go ahead. Fingers crossed, fingers and toes. As you said, we've just been doing some online work with Paul Jacobs, and yesterday's workshop was fabulous. So there's another one coming, isn't there? There is. So on the 26th of May, Paul's working with developing clairvoyance in our That's his specialty too. It absolutely is. So you can find that. It's best just to go to the @one events Facebook page. I'll put a link. Yeah, I'll put a link. Okay, below. Terrific. With my president of the Canberra Spiritualist hat on, we are always after support with our little association. So as you said, we've gone online, and that's really been wonderful because it's our way of keeping not only connected to our congregation, but bringing in new people to know that we exist. It is a spiritualist service. It's not just here's a medium and trot them out and make them perform. And we run our online service as close as possible to our face-to-face service with the principles and philosophy. Well, that's nice, because if you wanted to come to one and thought, what's this spiritualist church all about? Are they going to convert me, or are they going to, I don't know, do something weird? That's right. You get to come along online and realise that it's fairly straightforward, and you might even enjoy it. But exactly. So it's really, really wonderful. So I would say to anyone, get online, have a look. Visit our page. We are, like every other small association, still having to pay bills and things. So if you want to
keep the doors open, yes,
throw some money in the etheric donation plate, we'll gratefully receive it. And then outside of that, I'm still running my weekly online classes for all levels. So as you know, I've got my platform mediums group, and then I've got other circles who, you know, we sort of cover everything. And you know what, there's a lot of that confusion about how it would work, but it does. It does. And the connection is still there between the students, and there's a lot of sort of food for thought. So we're able to stay connected even apart, which is just really wonderful.
I love it, because I know that a lot of my students have graduated to your circles, and I've also graduated to, you know, Chris and Paul. And I had one student this morning saying, "Oh, do you think I can do Paul's workshop?" You know, of course you can. You know?
That's
so
one of the things.
Flowing around, everyone is sort of leading to each other, which is just great.
And that's just one of the things I love about you, Denise, because you're one of those teachers who has the generosity of spirit to say, I can share with you this, but you can also have a look at that one, and that one. And there is no fear with you. There's no sense of lack, that there is enough students and tutors and connections for us all to work together.
Yes, and you know, it takes a village, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And as tutors, we also have to understand that we don't have all the answers. And you know, my circles who've been with me for ages have all met Mavis and Chris and Paul and Christine and Scott, and you know, it's like, and so they should, because they want to get a sense of all the wisdom that they can.
Everybody's gifts, absolutely. Right. I love it. So I'll put those links down below so we can get connected. But my final question is, what is the spirited conversation you never get sick of talking about?
You know, it's probably a bit dry for a lot of people, but really, Denise, for me, it still comes down to service, to ethical, evidential mediumship, for mediums to be the best that they can be and to be the best ambassadors for the spirit world, to take their training seriously. You know, like I said, it's probably a little dry, but I just think, you know, if we're going to represent the spirit world, let's do it.
Do it properly.
Let's do it properly. Yeah. You know, let's do it so that we plant that seed in as many people as we can to say, life is eternal. You are spirit first and foremost. And isn't that the most magnificent piece of truth, to know that you are so much more than you imagine yourself to be, and you are connected to the divine, you are connected to everything. If that is some of the legacy of my service to the spirit world, then I will move into the next life happy with how I went.
With not too many people in a queue waiting to tell you off, probably.
Well, I'm sure there'll be one or two, and I'll be apologetic.
Sarah Jeffery, thank you so much for joining us today on Spirited Conversations, and I can't wait to see what you have next.
Thank you so much, Denise. Lovely to talk with you.